Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm pretty bummed.
Why is that?
I saw a picture of the Unabomber's office, the Unabomber's cabin on the web.
Was it ill-kept?
No, it turns out it's neater than my office.
That's not setting the bar very high, is it, Mickey?
I'm ducking down so viewers can take a look, but I think the Unabomber is sort of pretty neat compared to me.
I think I can probably top you here if you want to get competitive. I don't know how much people can see here, but...
I've seen your office. It's pretty grim.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was depressing that I'm living in a sub-Unabomber state of disorganization.
Well, that's really sad.
How are you?
Well, you know, I'm pretty tired, behind on my sleep, and yet happy as a clam.
And why is that?
Well, I'm pretty excited about Blogging Heads TV's new branding initiative.
I didn't know about this.
Well...
I'm always the last to know.
Yeah, you are, and there's a reason for that, but I won't get into that. I'm holding up in front of it. You can't see, but a youth soccer jersey. Here's one, okay, and now here's another youth soccer jersey. Gonna hold up, and one thing they have in common is that both of them say Blogging Heads TV on them. They're both very handsome jerseys from Manhattan Youth Soccer League, and it seems that Blogging Heads TV is a sponsor of this soccer league, Mickey.
Did you know that?
Well, it's funny you should ask. I mean, one might wonder how it came to be since we don't have any money. And I have to be a little hush-hush about this, but I will say that there is a friend of Blogging Heads TV who is very influential in youth soccer circles in Manhattan.
Is this Jeff Jarvis?
No, but we're happy to welcome him on board if he wants to sponsor anything on our behalf.
I just thought he's big into websites that cover high school sports. That's all.
Well, that was an interesting connection for you to make. As it happens, it's not going to lead us anywhere. But but what this convinced me of, Mickey, is that if we ever do have a marketing budget, I don't care how much, $5,000, $5 million, I want to spend every dollar sponsoring youth soccer leagues around America and getting the name out, because you know what they say about soccer in America, don't you?
They say it's inherently connected to blogging.
No. They say it's the sport of the future, and it always will be. And I think Blogging Heads should always be associated with the future, should always be part of America's future.
You're a friend of the future. Does it have our little logo on it?
What logo would that be? No, it just has the URL. I mean, after all, sponsoring youth soccer leagues is a competitive business. There are other little logos on this. Although, actually, no, it just says the logo of the soccer league.
We're just on there.
We own these jerseys. What?
We're on there with other corporations.
No, it turns out we're not. I was wrong about that. We're the sole sponsor.
Like Valvoline and Comcast and things like that. Okay.
We would welcome them. It's all non-zero sum, man. It's all good.
Well, that's there should be some like soccer pun we could the family that vlogs.
Some play on soccer moms or something. Blogger mom. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's don't. We're too old to do free association. Okay, Mickey.
Not on camera anyway.
Precisely. So even as we speak, I guess President Bush is more or less chatting with Prime Minister Maliki of Iraq. Is that right? Or has that happened already?
No, I think it's happening right now.
Right at the moment. I predict that they will come out with a statement vowing some sort of resolve.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Thank you.
The interesting things that I've seen, we have, since we last talked, I have a better idea of what it is that Iran and Syria would want from us in exchange for somehow helping us to calm down the situation in Iraq. Syria is, thank God, scared of this Hariri investigation, and they're worried that it's going to nail some of their top people, which is good because it's something we can give them that is in the larger scheme of things relatively cheap, although certainly not for the people of Lebanon.
Isn't is the UN doing the investigating?
I think it's under the auspices of the UN, yes.
So how easy is it for us to say we'll call off the dogs? Leaving aside the question of the propriety of that.
Very good question. And it's also weird that Syria would respond to being terrified by of this by killing another Lebanese politician.
Yeah, I was going to say they don't seem especially cowed. They don't seem especially. I mean, assuming that we don't know for sure who did that, and it was kind of odd timing. But
the best defense is a good offense.
Maybe that's the thinking.
Although it's odd that also Russia seems to have reacted to our weakness by starting to kill a bunch of people too. If this Russian spy who was killed was in fact killed by
I know, who with his dying breath cursed Putin for allegedly doing it.
Iran. Iran's goals seem pretty less secret. They want to be allowed to keep the bomb. And it's interesting to see what would be so. Suppose we agreed to all those things. What's so terrible about letting Iran and Syria have a lot of dominance over Iraq? I don't quite see what that gets them, except a whole bunch of trouble.
You don't see what it gets them?
Yeah. There's all this global talk about this Diplo talk about expanding sphere of influence, but don't they inherit a bunch of trouble and won't they eventually come to loggerheads with each other? And isn't Syria a Sunni regime and Iran a Shiite regime, and eventually that's going to be trouble? And
well, countries have often proved expansionist policies that got them in trouble. It seems to be kind of an instinct, for better or worse. And in that neighborhood, I think the feeling is it's so insecure that the more turf you've got nominal control of, the better. I don't know. I heard on the radio that what Iran would want is permission to build a nuclear bomb and security guarantees from the U.S. Seems to me unlikely that anyone in the Bush administration has seriously contemplated giving them both of those. I think that the Bush administration might be like just a day or so away from warming up to the idea of giving them security guarantees if they would not build the bomb, So I don't know. We've talked before about how little leverage we have over Iran at the moment and how much we'd like to get out of it.
It seems to me, why would they take that? They'll probably get away with building a bomb and being secure.
Well, if there's a credible threat of force, that you never know what they would do. Not that I'm advocating that, but that's the thing that would get their attention. I mean, using the force, I think, would be a bad idea. And it's kind of a blurry line between credibly threatening it and using it.
We'd have to somehow bring Israel on board to make such a promise credible, right?
That we would not invade, or that we wouldn't? No, that we would.
We'd have to
that we would bomb
Iran, that we would restrain Israel.
Oh yeah, we would have to do that.
Otherwise, we're just doing a Mutt and Jeff routine where we're the nice guy, and then Israel comes and hammers them.
Yeah. No, the other thing Israel could do, as we've said, is do some token thing on their nuclear front. Shut down the Dimona reactor, and maybe even give up 5% of their 300 nuclear warheads, and promise vaguely that say vaguely they would like to someday disarm if the Middle East were free of nuclear weapons and stable or something. But nobody's talking about that.
The other weird development is in the Sunni areas there was all this sort of good news bubbling up on the web about how the Sunni tribal leaders have realized they have to rein in the insurgency, and they're working with us, and we have various successes. And then there's this Tom Ricks piece about how the Marines are so depressed about Anbar province that they're thinking of leaving, although it didn't indicate that they were going to leave, just that they were contemplating it. So I don't know quite what to make of that. I mean, obviously it's a huge black mark against Bush that there was no Al-Qaeda organization in Iraq before, and now it's the most powerful organization in a province.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually not Al-Qaeda per se, although it's now under the Al-Qaeda brand. I mean, the people who moved in, it was a pre-existing terrorist organization that did a deal with Al-Qaeda and became an affiliate. But
right. But
they were not. They were not. I think by and large in Iraq, they were Jordan-based.
Right.
The one reason that I guess this summit is a little awkward is because this memo that was written by Bush's national security advisor after his visit to Iraq was leaked. I don't know how intentionally. I mean, I don't know how high up the intention to leak it goes, but the reporting on it was that it expresses grave doubt about Prime Minister Maliki's either ability or intention to do good.
It looked like a warning shot to me.
I guess, although the funny thing is, if you actually read the memo, that on the one hand, that is kind of the vibe. I mean, the very first sentence of it, it is technically agnostic on the question of how committed he is and how competent he is. The very first sentence is, "We returned from Iraq convinced we need to determine if Prime Minister Maliki is both willing and able to rise above the sectarian agendas being promoted by others." Now, you might ask, why did you have to go to Iraq to conclude that you need to determine that, right? I mean, I'm just sitting here talking to a friend, and I know that we need to figure out what the deal is with this guy. And the obvious answer is that is a kind of veiled way of saying up high, it's the first sentence of the memo, that actually they have grave doubts about that. And then, as I said, technically they remain agnostic about that. The much-quoted line is, the reality on the streets suggests Maliki is either ignorant of what is going on, misrepresenting his intentions, or that his capabilities are not yet sufficient to turn his good intentions into action. That does seem to express doubt. And yet, on the other hand, the only thing attributed to actual intelligence gathering, in other words, the only assessment of him that you and I could not have achieved, just reading the papers, is where it says, sensitive reporting suggests he is trying to stand up to the Shia hierarchy and force positive change. Moreover, the rest of the memo, a lengthy list of things they could do in Iraq, is premised on Maliki being the guy. Maliki being, the focal point of any effort whatsoever. And so, there doesn't seem to be a plan B, certainly not in this memo, if Maliki's not our man. So in that sense, the whole memo does not read like a shot across the bow. It does not read like a threat.
But that would, if you were doing a shot across the bow right now, you wouldn't say, oh, by the way, plan B is to depose him and replace him with Chalabi or somebody. You would just leave it at that, and that's what the memo does.
But it doesn't leave it at that. There's this incredibly detailed action plan of things you can do to help Maliki. Now, and one thing this does is answer a question that we have asked. I mean, when people say Maliki has to confront Muqtada al-Sadr, we always say, wait a second, al-Sadr controls the votes that put Maliki over the top. If you lose him, then you've lost a majority in Parliament. Well, there is this plan in here to compensate for that by arranging to have a coalition of moderates, a new coalition among existing members of Parliament who would back Maliki. So basically he would dump the radicals and acquire a new moderate coalition. How would we get the moderates on board? Well, quote, consider monetary support to moderate groups that have been seeking to break with larger, more sectarian parties. So, in other words, I mean, I think the idea is you put a lot of money in the pockets of people in Parliament and hope that they choose to spend it on the greater good of Iraq. At least, if nothing else, that is an answer to the question I've always had, which is how can you alienate al-Sadr and remain an effective prime minister? That's the plan.
But I never thought that the problem with disarming al-Sadr is that he has this parliamentary bloc. The problem is that the government doesn't have the military power to disarm al-Sadr.
There is that too. I mean, those are two problems that together would seem formidable. The A, you can't do it. B, if you did, you'd be screwed.
This all smacks a bit about Clinton's plan for Kosovo, which is, we shouldn't have... they're mired in these sectarian hatreds. They need to rise above it and establish a unified, non-sectarian democracy. Well, it was pie in the sky. It didn't happen, and it sure sounds like pie in the sky about Iraq.
Yeah. No, I mean, at this point, it said one thing it says in this memo is, we need to convince, for example, the Sunnis that America somehow provide security and convince both groups that they can have security without relying on their own militias. We will provide the security or get it provided for them. But, at this point, it's not just about security. A lot of it is now about revenge, and that's providing a lot of the momentum. And I don't know. You at last check held out a 10 to 15% chance for this someday turning out to have been a good idea, the Iraq adventure. Do you find your estimate dropping by any chance?
With the perspective of decades of hindsight.
Oh, I see. You're just going to increase it from. You're just going to increase the time horizons. It'll be centuries next week.
Exactly.
Okay. Now it was years. Now it's decades. Okay.
But there's this poll that you referred to in the afterthought section about Iraqis, despite all the sectarian fears, preferring to live in a unitary Iraq.
Mm-hmm. I think it was actually on the homepage.
Yeah. Can you reconcile that with what's actually happening on the ground? I guess there are all these innocent bystanders who aren't involved in the violence who answer to pollsters.
Could be, and until you see how a polling question was worded, it's always hard to say.
And they also know that the pollster wants that answer.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, this polling is, and I don't have even a link. I just heard it on the radio. It was on the BBC, and it was an Iraqi pollster.
Okay.
So I do not know.
Okay.
And that is my feeling about Iraq generally. But don't you get the sense that the pessimism is just rapidly accumulating in America? I mean, Tom Friedman wrote a column today saying this is worse than Civil War. It's more chaotic. So, and saying, either we get something like either we get out in 10 months or we commit to the 10-year project it would take to prevail. Well, I don't think anybody's up for 10 years, and I don't know who seriously believes that you could have confidence that some kind of 10-year program would really prevail. I mean, nobody has a realistic clue what the situation's going to be there in 18 months, much less 5-10 years.
If we would continue to bleed at about the rate we're bleeding now for 10 years, and that had the effect of tamping down the violence and preventing a whole bunch of people from being killed, why wouldn't that be worth it?
Wait, say that again. I'm sorry.
Suppose we could just keep sending troops over there, and if a couple dozen get killed every month, and this goes on for 10 years, and the good that comes out of it is that we suppress a very bloody civil war, and we don't brutally suppress it, but we tamp it down so that
if that were the price to pay for a good outcome, I would consider it worthwhile. I just think, the idea that you have the remotest confidence in that being the case, it's a chaotic system at this point. No one knows, and there's every evidence that in some ways the presence of American troops, there's a real downside to American troops intervening as well as any upside. If you could convince me that there's a really good chance of that, I'd say sure.
Well, in Anbar, for example, this Marine report said that we have been successful. The one that was so pessimistic that Tom Ricks wrote about, we have been successful in tamping down the violence, and also that they turned to Al-Qaeda not because they need Al-Qaeda to fight the Americans, which was the original Matt Iglesias left-wing line, but they need Al-Qaeda to fight the Shiites, and they're worried the Americans are going to leave, so they need Al-Qaeda all the more. So
well, wait, first of all, I think it's changed. I think Al-Qaeda was more about fighting Americans at one point, and then Al-Qaeda decided to shift the focus. That is Al-Qaeda in Iraq by, exacerbating the sectarian tensions. But anyway.
Right, but the reason they are winning the allegiance of the Sunnis is as a sword against the Shiites.
That's why they wanted to start that sectarian strife in the first place, because that would give them a way to win the Sunni hearts and minds.
Exactly. Well, it's worked.
It has worked.
But the point is that at this point, our troops are inhibiting the growth of Al Qaeda, not producing it. So this theory that we're doing more harm than good isn't true, as far as I can see from that story.
That our troops are valuable in suppressing Al Qaeda.
Yeah, I wish it would be very convenient if one could conclude our troops are doing more harm than good, so we just pull them out. I mean, that's a nice, neat solution, and it's sort of a no-brainer. But I think the situation's worse than that. That's my point.
Okay. Well, I don't profess to know what the smart thing to do is.
Okay.
But we can conclude on your note.
Thank you.
Good concluding note. And I think you're going to be carrying the ball into the next topic as well, right?
I wrote a book about income inequality, and it's very annoying that income inequality has become an issue again.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought, given how long it took you to write that book, that it would turn out to come out too soon, man?
I thought but I thought I'd put the issue to rest. But it's a big democratic issue, and it's a big media-driven issue. It's sort of like there was a meeting somewhere where Steve Ratner and the heads of the liberal conspiracy got together and decided, hey, we'll make income inequality an issue. But it's a real issue. There was actually a good article by a reporter I hate named Louis Ushitel of the New York Times.
Why do you hate him?
Because he's Mr. Gloom. He's never been a piece of economic news that he thought was favorable, at least while Bush was in office, but I think also when Clinton is off. Everything's always going to hell in the handbag, even when wages are increasing. He has a sort of pessimism. If he's not a Marxist, he has the outlook that a Marxist would have.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but it was very good about the split of the Democratic Party between Rubinomics, which is free trade, being good for everybody, and the more skeptical anti-globalization populism that seems to have actually won the election. And the anti-globalization populism wants to tamp down the forces of globalization and sort of preserve jobs. The Rubinomics wants to let the market continue to destroy good jobs, but offer some sort of safety net cushion for those who are displaced. And that sort of faction which is headquartered in an organization called the Hamilton Project, is sort of losing. And then I saw this David Wessel article in the Wall Street Journal about it had about 11 things that the Democrats were going to do to fight this growing inequality.
And you tend to be skeptical of such initiatives, right?
Well, right. But what was shocking was that they were sort of harmless. They were mildly good, most of them. Raise the minimum wage, make it easier for people to get health insurance, increase the earned income tax credit.
Well, also a more progressive tax structure, which is significant.
Why is that significant?
It's kind of the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of fighting income inequality, and I thought it was the kind of tool that you had more or less abandoned. And I thought part of the argument of your book was we should more or less give up fighting income inequality. It's due to inexorable forces. Let's focus on social equality instead.
That is the argument. That is the argument.
Well,
and increasing the top rate from 35 to 39% isn't going to reverse the rise in income inequality because it's driven by pre-tax incomes. It's driven by technology. It's driven by, the Charles Murray axiom that if you can increase IBM's market share by 1%, you're worth a couple $2 billion to them. And they're going to pay you something close to what you're worth. So the rich are going to get richer, and if fiddling with the tax code is not going to close that gap.
Well, I mean, nothing's going to close the gap, but if after-tax income is what's relevant to the question of how much income inequality there ultimately is.
But it's not going to slow the rise in after-tax, the gap in after-tax. It's not going to slow the increase in after-tax, in the gap in after-tax income appreciably either. I mean, throwing a pebble in the ocean raises the water level of the ocean. Of course, it's going to help.
Well, there's a lot of room there. I mean, at one point, the top tax rate was, 70 or 90%?
But nobody paid that. The top effective tax rate was way below that.
No, it was way more than it is. I mean, there's things you can do, and you do what you can, and I agree you're not going to get rid of it entirely, but I think it's worth doing.
Well, I don't think it's a terrible thing to do. Like I say, I thought these proposals they're inoffensive and ineffectual.
No, I mean, canceling. Look, there was a reason that Bush's constituency wanted those tax cuts, because it meant real money to them. If we do not extend those tax cuts, presumably that very constituency of affluent people will be a little disappointed. That's what I'm looking for.
Well, you're right that it could have this important political symbolism of dealing the rich a defeat. That's what's important, not its actual economic impact.
Well,
and the Bush tax cuts had a very important function in terms of keeping his coalition together beyond just sucking up to the rich.
Yeah. I mean, I also have a theory that now may be a good time for this kind of policy, because one of the raps against that sort of thing, like soaking the rich, is that it would tend to have a depressive effect on the economy. I think it might be a relatively good time for that. I mean, see if this makes any sense. The dollar has started to fall in a significant way relative to other currencies, and people have been waiting for this to happen for a long time because we've been running these two deficits, huge trade deficit, huge budget deficit. in principle, I mean, certainly, first of all, that will tend to be inflationary, right? And because foreign goods will be more expensive to us, and also because the goods we produce will be more attractive both to our consumers and to foreign consumers. And it will also tend to be economically stimulative, I think, up to a point. I mean, there is some great peril of the dollar dropping too fast, but I think short term it tends to be stimulative. That's why we've wanted China to appreciate their currency, right? It's the same effect. And if that turns out to be the dynamic at play, if the dollar continues to drop, you'd think that's a relatively good time to institute a tax policy that might have depressive effects, right?
Right, although I think there's a J curve involved there somewhere.
Oh, J.
I remember.
J curve.
I vaguely remember a J curve.
Okay, I take it back. I thought it was an S curve or a C curve.
But yes, though I agree, it seems like a good time. The economy is pretty hot. But I just, we should do it to balance the budget, I think, and to deal a political blow to the rich, not expect this to actually stop the rich from getting richer.
Well, there is such thing as psychic income, how much pleasure you get out of your income. And maybe lower income people get more pleasure out of their income if they know that the rich are unhappy.
Well, but the important things that the Democrats do would improve the lives of people at the bottom. They're not going to stop the rich from soaring out of sight. Well, no, but there are measures
like that included in that Wall Street Journal article. You mentioned some of them, like, health care.
Right. Those are all good things.
Yeah.
I'm for them. This is me being...
I mean, what did you expect to see in the article? I mean, communism proposed or what? I don't get it. These are the standard things you do about income inequality.
Crazy schemes to rein in CEO pay, extreme protectionism, absurd increases in the tax rate so that it would have a disincentive effect and create all sorts of mindless sheltering activity.
Well, what I'd like to see is a political bargain that forestalled protectionist forces by providing a lot of the kind of stuff in that Wall Street Journal article. If that's the way the Democratic Party should go, I think.
You could. When I was working for the Federal Trade Commission in the Carter era, we were going to declare it an unfair trade practice to close a factory. In France, it is hard to close a factory.
You can't do anything in France.
We could adopt a lot of European-style labor restrictions, or at least the Democrats could be trying to push them. I mean, there are all sorts of crazy things they could do that they aren't doing. The one crazy thing that I thought was there that was really, I thought, a potential disaster is allowing unions to organize just by getting a majority of workers to sign cards as opposed to actually vote in a secret ballot.
Yeah.
This is because unions are everywhere sort of in retreat. Or in most industries in retreat, they're like way less than 10% of the private sector workforce, and so they're losing. So they want to change the rules and make it easier for them to win. And they claim that, probably with some justification, that employers are intimidating workers, although it is a secret ballot. And the opponents of this claim with a lot of justification that if you have to vote in. If your union rep, your burly union rep, can come up to you and say, "Don't you want to sign this card?" You can be intimidated into voting for a union, even if it's not a secret ballot, even if you don't want one. And it all depends on, do you think unions are good for America or bad for America? And I look at Detroit, and I look at every unionized industry, and they're all in retreat, and they're all hampered by work rules and seniority rules and discharge rules. And I say, no, we don't want more unionism. So this is a bad idea. It's the one thing that would have the actual effect of crippling American industry.
Okay.
Have I got that off my chest?
I'm glad that I helped you do that. I have no comment. Except that I'm less anti-union than you.
That's wimpy of you.
Well, I actually didn't absorb all of that successfully because I was starting to feel like the pressure of the question of should we move on to the next topic, I felt like maybe I was the expediter at that point, and I started thinking about that, and I got slightly distracted. Also, I thought to myself, Nikki's on another anti-union rant.
The next topic because you didn't want to answer the question. But anyway.
No, it's actually not. It's that I actually didn't assimilate enough of the information. And yet, since our viewers did, let's not give them a second helping.
There are all sorts of interesting issues we haven't talked about we can leave for the future, like people lump together. There's a Tom Edsel column lumping together protectionism and immigration, restriction, and those sort of get lumped together under the rubric of nationalism or nativism or, closing up of America. But you can separate them, and you could have, free trade with unfree immigration.
You are living proof that they can be separated, right? That's your position.
Right. There's an interesting discussion of which combination do you want.
Yeah. Now, Pat Buchanan would be the kind of person he has in mind. That kind of the kind of populist nationalist right.
Right. But the interesting is, do you want border control and free trade, or protectionism and free trade in people? And it seems to me clearly the first one is preferable to the latter one. If you're going to mix and match these forms of nativism.
Well, I certainly agree that protectionism is one thing we should work to hold off and be willing to make trade-offs.
Yeah.
Once again, I remain non-committal. I mean, we've talked about immigration. We have somewhat different views there.
But the bottom line is we know how to improve the lives of people at the bottom, and it's with a tight labor market. And, all these things the Democrats are talking about are all good things, but they're not worth nearly as much as a tight labor market in terms of boosting wages. We have a tight labor market. Our goal should just be to keep it going for as many years as possible, because it seems to take a while to work. And just when everybody's complaining that the economy isn't delivering for people on the bottom, it starts delivering for people on the bottom. And that's right about now.
Okay, we'll check back in 6 months and make sure you're right.
Okay.
Now we move on to Mike Kinsley on web egoism or egotism? Egotism.
I think he calls it egoism.
He calls it egoism?
He wrote this column for Slate in the Washington Post about how egoistic people get on the web. I think he missed the basic point.
Okay, well, what did he say? First of all, a little tidbit. He starts off with his anecdote about how back in the 90s, people circulated this URL because someone in journalism, whom he doesn't name, had come up with a website that was named after them, right? Like
right.
RobertWright.com, except it wasn't me. And you pointed me to this post on some blog where they speculate as to who this was, because Mike doesn't name the name. He only talks about how aghast everyone was at the seeming egoism of it.
His point is they were aghast then, and now it's completely the norm.
Right, but the two names floated on this blog item are yours and Andrew Sullivan's. And I would just point out that one thing Mike says about this person, this unnamed person, is that he, quote, was a modest, soft-spoken, and self-effacing fellow. Mickey, I'm not sure that you and Andrew make that cut. I mean, I don't know how else to put that.
You don't even see any distinction between me and Andrew in the immodest self-promotion department? Jesus.
Well,
I thought you were my friend.
Well, sorry.
Jeez.
The other problem is, no, I mean, I think not many of us would qualify for that term. The other problem is you never had your name as a URL, did you?
I have kausfiles. It's neither of us, Bob. I know who it is, and it's neither of us.
Oh, disclose it.
I'm not going to disclose it.
Do some kind of code that I'll understand.
The person's a friend of mine.
That doesn't narrow it down. You're a friend of humankind, Mickey.
He's an important figure in the New America Foundation. That's all I will say. If you want to out him, go ahead. He's a very nice guy who I respect a lot.
That does narrow it down. Nice guy you respect a lot. I'm stumped. We'll talk afterwards.
Okay. Anyway, it's not me, Copper.
Okay, anyway, Mike's larger argument.
I was nowhere near Oakland.
Mike's larger argument. I mean, okay, so he talks about how somehow the web encourages this egoism. He goes to these MySpace-type sites and these people who kind of put pictures of themselves up and talk about their lives as if anybody cared. Well, what is your response?
The larger egoism of the web is the danger of egoism on the web is not that you'll write about your laundry or what you had for breakfast. Because there's just a limit to how many people are going to be interested in that if it's not done as a parody or as some sort of literary shtick. The dangerous form of egoism is you think you're Tony Curtis in Winner Kills. You think you're sitting at your keyboard and you're blogging about the border fence, and they signed the border fence bill and you think you produced it. So
well, That's always been the danger of journalism, period. Why shouldn't everyone share in that illusion?
Well, right, but it's a grosser illusion if you think, here I am in my little office, and I'm influencing events in faraway Washington. Why, with a touch of my keyboard, the Syrian government will fall.
Yeah.
And that's, I've fallen victim to those delusions of grandeur on occasion, and I think perhaps some other people who were known for their self-effacement and modesty have fallen victim to those delusions.
Do you have anybody in mind?
That's the dangerous. That's the great danger.
You know what I think the great danger is? I think the great danger is that people will start setting up video websites and have conversations with their friends as if anybody gave a damn what they have to say.
Well, but we're way too smart for that. We don't.
We would never make that mistake.
We would do that, but we would never think that you could actually make money or devote a substantial part of our lives to that.
That hurt, Mickey.
You deserved it.
That one really hurt. Here's what I.
You should have some Andrew Sullivan self-promotion.
I should or I could?
You should.
I know.
It would do you well.
Story of my life. I need to be less self-effacing.
What were you saying? Go ahead.
Well, my issue with Mike's argument is that it's actually kind of a little elitist, although Mike himself has actually never been elitist. He's been kind of anti-elitist. But the people he makes fun of, right, are these kind of everyday Joe people who are just thrilled at the idea that they can get their name and their face out in public where people might see it. A lot of them aren't really under the illusion that a lot of people are seeing it, but it's a thrill for them. And, it's easy for those of us who were in journalism back before anybody could declare themselves a journalist to kind of laugh at these people, right? But the fact is, we got a thrill out of seeing our names in print. I remember when my first job in journalism at a newspaper with a circulation of 35,000, I distinctly remember just staring at my byline when my first weeks of employment there, just marveling that it was print on paper and it was my name. And, that's no less self-absorbed than people who are now starting these websites. And it just seems to me a little, I don't know what the word is.
Fusty.
Little what?
Fusty.
Fusty?
It's sort of like old. It was like actually Gawker had the right word, but it's sort of just an old elite reacting against these damn
right.
people.
It's like now the masses can do what we've been doing all along and can indulge in the kind of egoism that we in fact have been indulging in all along.
It's very hard to figure out where to draw the line because unlike Andrew Sullivan, for example, I made the wrong choice, which is I don't really write a lot about my personal life on my blog, and Andrew does, and people love it because they feel it makes them know him better as a person. I should do more of it. Every time I do it, people like it.
You should do more of it.
Once you start down the road, it's really hard to see where you stop before you end up like Bob Packwood in his diaries talking about how the tuning dial on the KLH stereo isn't quite as good as the dial on the Boston acoustic stereo. I mean, it's
Bob Packwood, the senator?
Yes.
Are there any other parallels between you and him you'd like to discuss?
No, but the point is he had these diaries which were very similar to what blogs are today and tedious in exactly the sense that he thought people wanted to know what Bob Packwood, thought about the vernier tuning knob on the radios he was trying out at the stereo store. And I've had thoughts about, the redesign of the Audi A4's rear end that I thought of sharing with the public, but then I thought, well, this really is too trivial and Packwood-like.
And kind of personal, really, what you think about a car's rear end.
Well, I have a whole theory about that, but you don't want to get into it.
No, I don't. Actually, I do. I think you should talk more about your personal life on Blogging Heads TV since you don't do it on your blog. It's a more natural medium for it. Come on, Mickey, bring it out.
I already do talk.
Share with us.
I already do talk more about my personal life on Blogging Heads.
What have you said about your personal life?
I said my office was worse than the Unabomber.
Wow.
But anyway,
there's something I feel I need to say in defense of Mike quickly. When I said that we've all been indulging in egoism for years, and now that the masses can play, he complains about it. He was actually never bad about that at all. When he was editor of the New Republic, I don't think he ever put his name on the cover. whereas some subsequent editors probably did.
Oh, no, never did that. And also he understood that that's what drove people to write. He always said, this article is going to make you famous. He said that to me about 100 times, and I stopped believing him.
You are famous. Although in the end, I think it was Blogging Heads TV that pushed you over the edge.
Anyway, that's my thought on the Kinsley column.
That's mine, too.
And the elitism is... This is an incredible segue, Bob. The elitism of Kinsley is similar to the elitism of Borat going out and making fun of ordinary Americans.
Interesting comparison.
Similar, but they're both elitism. What?
You know, our timing was so bad last week, we decided to tape on a Monday. We talked about Borat, and then, like, as we were talking, this Michael Richards story, which I claim is kind of related, you know, the Kramer outburst at the Comedy Factory story.
And how do you claim it's related?
Well, I mean, you know, Michael Richards woke up one morning not planning to have his bigoted comments broadcast all over the world, but they were. There are real characters in the movie Borat who woke up one morning not planning to have their bigoted comments broadcast all over the world,
well,
but they were. I mean, who are they equally blameworthy, or were some people victims, or what? It's a, you know, and then there's the Mel Gibson case somewhere, you know, on the terrain as well.
Well, clearly the Borat people are much more victims because Borat implants the idea in their minds.
Well, we don't know because we haven't seen the tapes really. But that's why I'd love to see the unedited, you know, the tapes surrounding those finely edited comments.
He clearly does with the gun owner where he says, "Can I use this to kill Jews?" I mean, he's trying.
I'm not even sure that's his. It seemed to me when I saw that language, it was at least conceivable that he had built up to that with some story about how there was a particular Jew trying to get him. Because I think he used it in the singular.
But he's clearly trying to bait the guy into saying something anti-Semitic. And so that guy's, if he had said something anti-Semitic, would be less worthy of blame than Michael Richards, who, you know, got out of bed and there was no Borat there egging him on. If you saw the Richards thing, he clearly was, though, in his mild defense, he clearly did think, hey, maybe this is edgy comedy. Maybe
that is actually my view.
If you actually watch the thing.
Yeah, I came to that conclusion too.
I'm revealing the dark side, and there's a humor in revealing the dark side of, and especially when he's yelling the N-word out, he's clearly parodying, I think, what people say.
You know, it's funny that not more people had that react. You're about the only person I've heard volunteer that view. I haven't really been reading widely on it, but that was my reaction, and the more I watched it, the more convinced I became that although he may have had the occasional, he may have been a little out of control, he was fundamentally thinking that he was within the framework of radical transgressive comedy. He starts out with that line about 50 years ago, you would have been hanging upside down, blah, blah, blah. That's when he ventures into ethnic territory. And I venture to say that kind of thing itself is not unheard of. I mean, when you have somebody who you perceive as a heckler in a comedy club, it is a showdown. You're supposed to humiliate them, and I think it is a tradition to get pretty down and dirty. And, you know, Don Rickles used to do this thing about, you know, on national TV, not with hecklers, but he would pick people out and riff on their ethnicity and talk about eating watermelon and stuff. So I kind of think, you know, that's when he first ventures in there, and people kind of laugh, right? And then he takes it a step further and starts using the N-word. And not only that, but then when it kind of starts not working, he yells. He seems to be kind of in character as he's using it. Then when people kind of aren't reacting well, he at one point yells at them something like, "Don't you see what's underneath you?" Like as if he's trying to say, it seems as if he's trying to say, I am parodying racism here and saying we're all like this.
Although he seems later in his apology to imply that it just comes bubbling up from him specifically.
Well, I suspect, I mean, if we're right about the first part, I suspect that somebody gave him the classic advice about apologies in this situation, which is don't get into nuance. Just say you're sorry. And it's true that if he had said, oh, I was trying to make a joke, that would have been widely ridiculed, right? So it's a tough situation. I'm not sure if it was a good time to heed that advice, but that could be what happened. He was kind of ambiguous, actually, in the Letterman apology. He did later get into this territory about how, he was trying to do something with it comedically. I don't know. Right. It was weird. Go ahead.
Now he has this very slick PR person, Howard Rubenstein, who's telling him to go talk to Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and do the standard,
absolution.
Get absolution. And so I think it's the end of nuance on that end. But he also he also said something which was volunteered to me as his best defense, which is to say I'm crazy. Which sort of absolves him of, which is actually a pretty good defense.
Yeah.
He didn't seem crazy in any of the interviews, I must admit. Whereas Mel Gibson does seem crazy in all his interviews.
Well, Mel Gibson seems, in the hierarchy of blame among these various characters, it seems to me that Mel Gibson is at the top, right?
Really?
He wasn't joking.
He's the craziest.
Well, yeah. I mean, A, he wasn't joking. B, he's the one who got himself drunk and got himself picked up by the police, and you bear all the consequences of that. If he had killed somebody, he'd be responsible for that.
But he's the one who there's this one website that says he has bipolar disorder, and if you look at his profile on IMDb, it says flatly he has bipolar disorder. So he would be also the only person who was actually diagnosed with a mental problem.
I don't think that was his problem that night, personally. I think his problem was that he was drunk and was more candid than he might otherwise have been with an arresting officer.
I think if you're bipolar and you get drunk, you often have breakdowns.
Could be.
I don't think it's a good combination.
Could be. But, aren't you of the view, it seems to me I've heard you've expressed the view that basically everyone is a racist at heart?
I do think that. I think there's sort of a primordial... I'm big on primordial impulses, but it does seem to me there's a primordial impulse to harbor prejudice against other people.
Well, I think there is. I think groupishness is natural, right? It's not necessarily along ethnic grounds, I mean,
it's on whatever grounds.
But I think people are quick to want to generalize about groups in order to either explain away their problems or to kind of mediate their resentments or whatever.
Or they use them as statistical shorthand for danger or et cetera, et cetera. I mean,
right.
So yeah, I have the 60s view that it's in us all, and we all struggle to overcome it.
That's why I always have a little sympathy for these people. And in fact, when I saw Richards apologize, I suddenly, when I had seen the outburst, I just thought, okay, off with his head. Then when I saw him apologize, I kind of felt sorry for him. But I still thought, I'm sorry, but the way the system works, he has to be sanctioned. I mean, there's a reason that this is a bright line between the N-word and other words. And, we have an ethnically diverse society. It more or less works. Not many societies have worked that way. This is one of the reasons it works. There are taboos. And it's maybe unfortunate and unfair that he has to be a victim and be punished, but I think he does. Sorry.
Well, he's being punished by... I mean, the problem is the audience is totally savvy. It gets the better of him and says, basically, you have no career to lose anyway.
Well, the one guy, I think that's actually the guy, my impression is that's the guy he started off going one-on-one with who said that.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
so that's why you never,
My line, of course, is he wasn't even funny on Seinfeld, so...
Well, I barely watched that.
For a guy who wasn't funny to be, incredibly rich and living off Seinfeld, royalties for the rest of his life is not such a horrible punishment. The other thing is that Seinfeld wasn't completely blameless in arranging this apology for Richards, because presumably he gets money from the release of the Seinfeld DVDs.
Right.
And if their sales go down, he won't get his next $1 billion.
Yeah, I mean, I feel there's two sides of that. I mean, it's true that he has a financial interest in rehabilitating Richard's career. On the other hand, in a way, it took a little courage, I think, to go on national TV and say, this is my friend, I love him, and so on. And I thought Letterman took a little bit of a risk. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But
I agree with that. It's just not completely pure.
No, it's certainly not. That's the first thing a person like me thought of, in fact.
Okay, well, that's because cynicism is primordial with you.
Yes.
So I don't think we have anything more to say about these bigots.
I don't think so, no. No.
Okay.
We welcome comments from our commenters on the subject, so long as they don't violate any taboos. Speaking of comments, Mickey.
Yes.
Isn't that the next thing we're going to talk about?
It is.
Our commentors?
Yes. And the one I picked out was...
Comments have been pretty good, first of all, I think.
Sorry?
The comments I think, there have been many comments at a pretty high level. I mean, when I last looked, like comment number 41 or 42 was this... There was this discussion about whether troops are, whether we have enough troops and whether there's more to spare. And there were people with actual knowledge of the subject doing really intelligent analysis of it.
I agree, and people say that we could get 50,000 more troops if we got all the non-essential people wasting their time doing NP duty.
Yeah.
Over to Abu Ghraib. I agree.
Completely unedited
comment.
I have deleted one comment. Comment. It was a comment that all it did was make fun of the appearance of somebody on Blogging Heads. And it wasn't me. I would not delete it if you did that, but it was somebody else. I just deleted it. And, quickly, one other kind of procedural matter. Because we have the aforementioned problem of the threads in the comment section, the threads you see if you go to the forum being collapsed into one chronological dimension underneath the video box in a way that makes it unclear who people are responding to. If commenters want to begin their comments by saying who they're responding to, Bill, that kind of thing.
I'm smiling because that's the second time you've attempted to explain the difference between the two forms of commentary verbally on air.
But this is the first time I've had that idea, right?
It is completely hopeless.
No, but I mean, if some people do this, it will be clearer who they're talking to.
Yes, it's good in response to kidney stones, let me say this. Yes,
exactly.
That would be very useful.
Yes.
My line is, people were upset because I didn't say what sin Mark Warner committed, supposedly according to gossip and rumor, that caused him to drop out of the presidential race.
Mm-hmm. I chided you for that too on the air. Yes.
But the commenters did, and since then I ran into actually somebody at a party who worked for Radar magazine, and Radar actually had a story on it at the time. So I'm going to put up a link to this. I'm not going to say it on the air. I am going to do a little sound effect that is going to indicate what the problem might have been. Can you hear that? No.
No. What did it sound like?
It sounds...
Like somebody scratching a microphone?
No. It sounds like a zipper bob. Anyway.
I'm having trouble making the connection.
It's my prop for the day. Well, when you read this Radar clip, you'll see what the rumored problem Mark Warner had was.
Okay. I have theories. So should I say something about specific comments?
Yes.
First of all, a viewer named Jaltcoch, Jaltcoch, I doubt that's his real name, says the comment consists entirely of this. Note to Bob, chickens aren't mammals, period. That's it. Mickey, what's wrong with this comment? No ding-a-link. How can we tell whether I in fact contended that chickens are mammals? And I contend that I didn't contend this. And I would like to see the ding-a-link that shows that I did. What I meant to be saying, you were like gushing about the bear in Borat, and I said you've always liked mammals, referring to your obvious affection for your little moose doll. Maybe you said chickens in there somewhere, but this is why we need ding-a-links. There's a reason that God gave us ding-a-links, Jaltcoch. He wants us to use them, and if Jaltcoch creates a ding-a-link that takes my remarks out of context, as arguably happened in the movie itself.
What are you going to do to it?
I'm going to provide a richly contextualized ding-a-link in response, Mickey. I'm going to retaliate.
You're going to be awfully busy.
That's true. We'll see what Jaltko does, though. I also liked another good use of Dinglink was the guy who called you on this India-Pakistan thing, you know?
That was depressingly good, because at first I thought he'd taken me out of context, and I'd been admirably, I said I actually don't know what happened in the partition of India and Pakistan, and then it turned out I then went on and said it was my impression.
You said I think it wasn't very violent or wasn't violent.
My impression. I was completely wrong, and I'm sort of upset.
And you're chastened.
I'm more than chastened, because I was completely full of it and didn't know what I was talking about, and why would anybody listen to me talk about anything after seeing that Dinglink?
That was my question. It was with some reluctance that I called attention to that Dinglink from the homepage. Did you see how I did that to you?
Yeah, I resent it.
I know. It was probably a bad idea for Blogging Heads TV, period. It really calls the whole enterprise into question.
I mean, if I'm that ignorant about an important fact of world history...
Exactly. Plus, if you watched the segment closely, you saw that I wasn't exactly just chock full of actual knowledge about the situation. I was just doing a slightly better job than you of concealing my ignorance.
You were complicit, and you could have said, no, Mickey, you're wrong.
No, I did say there was violence.
Did you do that? No, you didn't. Yes.
Oh, we have a Dinglink dispute. We'll have a Dinglink showdown. I challenge you to a Dinglink duel, Mickey.
You can waste all the time you want posting Dinglinks. I have...
Well, people can just go back. We'll repost Tom O'Gorman's Dinglink, and he'll say, you express skepticism as to whether it was violent, and I say, oh, it was violent, kind of vaguely, because not having any idea the magnitude of the violence. But I was definitely closer to the truth.
You were closer. It's just you could have forcefully corrected me, and you didn't.
No, I didn't know enough to forcefully correct you. I was trying to finesse the whole thing.
That would be the point. That would be the point.
Right.
Anyway, so I don't know. Sometimes Dinglinks can be too effective.
They're dangerous. They're dangerous. They, as I said on the homepage, they are an asymmetrical threat to us. People can wield them at our expense.
Correct. Anyway, I was, that was deeply troubling.
It was.
So, I can't believe my zipper joke didn't work. Anyway.
You never know. They may be chortling out there in the heartland.
I feel like Michael Richards.
What?
I feel like Michael Richards.
No, I think your day went better than his Saturday night last weekend.
Well, the night is young.
But isn't it? I mean, the transparency is an interesting feature of that story too. You know, I mean, 10 years ago, that's just nothing. I mean, there's no documentation of it, and it would have no effects. Now, A, somebody tapes it with their cell phone. B, any human, in the economically developed world can watch it. That's amazing.
It is, I mean, one of its minor ramifications is it's probably changed stand-up comedy, because everything you say as a comedian can now be broadcast worldwide, whereas before, Don Rickles could put people viciously down and tell filthy, filthy jokes without worrying.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think the appeal of the comedy clubs had traditionally been partly that, this is unedited, it's not for TV. And now, I guess comedians can't really behave quite that way.
I guess they can confiscate your cell phones before you show up, but this was a pretty elite crowd, so you're not going to get them to confiscate their cell phones.
I mean, I guess they can still do kind of filth and stuff, but major taboos they can't. I mean, the movie The Aristocrat has, I think, opened up pretty much anything in the, incest / feces realm.
I still didn't see that movie, so I don't know what the.
I hated that movie, but that's a topic for another day, I suppose. And but no, it's related. It's related, which is the premise of the movie seems, to the extent that there's a clear premise in that movie, it's that transgression is an intrinsic good. Violating taboos is intrinsically good. There's no particular reason that they articulate that it's good to make jokes about incest. The premise, which is close to explicit, really, in some of the discussions, it's always good to violate taboos. I just disagree. I don't think this was constructive, what Michael Richards did. And in fact, I remember saying after that movie, oh, well, if they're so convinced of this, let's see them take a real risk. Let's hear the N-word on this movie, if they feel so strongly about this. And A, they didn't have the courage, and B, I don't think it's a good idea.
I think sometimes we honor taboos by violating them and joking about them.
Well, I mean, the fact that we call it the N-word rather than ever pronouncing it honors the taboo and helps articulate the taboo.
That may not be one of the taboos I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of a joke I heard recently that was only funny because it was wildly transgressive. It involved placing children in microwave ovens.
I think you might as well go whole hog at this point, Mickey.
No, I'm just going to keep that one to myself.
You do this at the end of every episode. Last time it was Mark Warner.
I did it in the middle, too. I've kept the identity of the Kinsley journalist.
Is there a connection? Did Mark Warner place a child in a microwave oven, Mickey? Is that what happened?
No, I emphatically deny that. Not to my knowledge. So, yeah, no, I don't reveal everything to the world because I don't want people in Bangladesh or wherever you suggested to know it all, you know?
Right.
I'm not going to make Michael Richards' mistake.
No, sir.
Not me.
Not you.
I know it's a new world.
We're both too busy making other mistakes.
Correct.
Now, I guess we better go back and make some of them. Not that the last hour hasn't been one of them, but let's move on to other ones.
It might have been. Okay.
All right.
See
you around.
Bye.